So, welcome to Breaking the Chains Repatriation Journey. I'm Bakita, and I'm here with my guy, Gabriel. And Gabriel, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Right, my name is Gabriel Amma. Interested. I was born in the UK in 1975 to two Ghanaian parents. So I'm a first generation Ghanaian British, basically. We met, I think about 7 years ago now, isn't it? Or in Ghana.
We met
through Ghana International Expats, yeah. Yeah, I started off playing soccer, damaged my ankle earlier on, so I went into the next best thing that I knew and studied, which was music. And I did sound engineering and electronics, but I'm actually a songwriter, music producer, and all that stuff as well. So I've worked in the music industry for over 25 years. But yes, I do other things, as you know. I do real estate. Even during the time that I was actually doing, whether I was touring or producing for different people's albums, I was doing other courses. Like I did courses in carpentry, I did courses in bricklaying as well, all with the main purpose of eventually, settling in Ghana. And not necessarily me actually doing the work, but at least being able to oversee it. So at least if I know the trade, nobody could pull a fast one and try and hustle me if I know the trade. So I learned those two trades. Sorry, I did plumbing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not gas plumbing, but I did water plumbing. So I know a bit about that as well. So when it came, I think when I'm transitioned into real estate, it more or less it was like natural.
Yeah, it kind of came natural.
Yeah.
So, what made you decide that, okay, I'm gonna leave the UK and go to this third world country that I didn't really grow up in, but I'm just gonna go there?
Well, the interesting story about that was that I first went to Ghana when I must have been about 6 years old. My parents had separated. I don't know if they had divorced at that time. No, they separated. So my mum left with us. I'm the youngest of three boys. So we were in Ghana between 1981 and 83. And that was a very difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
Before then, obviously, Rollins had overthrown the government, and there was a situation that was happening where there was some kind of famine that was happening during that time. Because I remember that whole yellow corn thing. We never had much to eat. And, it's kind of funny because, when you watch CNN and all those kind of Western media where they show starving children in Africa, then they show the airplanes landing and throwing food and all that kind of stuff. I actually witnessed something similar to that. Not as dramatic as throwing things out of the plane, but I do remember, I don't know if it was the UN or whatnot, but I do remember waking up in the morning and going to line up for a long time to buy just basic necessities like food and stuff. And my cousin used to carry me on his shoulder because I was very good at catching stuff as well. So they used to throw the bread and I used to just catch it and like,
wow.
yeah. So, I went through that kind of hardship and being smuggled through the border because the borders were closed and we were in Togo. And, we had to be smuggled back into Ghana. And, it was a crazy time because we could have been shot dead. But, at the time my aunt had our British passport. So when the soldiers kind of stopped us as well, when they stopped us on the way, through the back way to get back into Ghana, she started crying and, I knew that there was a problem until she took out our passports and they were like, okay, let them go. So that was kind of like a saving grace from that perspective. But in terms of my returning back to Ghana, I left in 83, came back to the UK, went to school, did all the things that, normal kids do, then went back at the age of 13. At the time, when I got back into the UK, I was finding it difficult because not only I came back into the country, I had a different accent. and some of the the white guys that, and some of the Jamaicans as well, that were, they thought they could bully me because they heard that I had a different accent, thought they could just step to me in that way, and it didn't turn out pretty for them, put it this way. And so I had a bit of problems going through school just because of, I was different. I thought differently anyway.
Yeah.
So my whole idea, even though I was young, my whole idea towards life was totally different.
Mm-hmm.
So so I went back to Ghana when I was 13 to go to school, finished when I was 17. And I never went back. I didn't go back, not because I hated Ghana. I just didn't go back because there was a few experiences that I witnessed whilst I was out there, in terms of how my mum was dealt with by her relatives. My mum would send money. She worked very hard. She was a nurse and everything, and she used to send back money to relatives and stuff, and they would take advantage. And I was there at the time when, she was sending money for us, to go to school, and the money was just being squandered and used for other things, whilst we were just getting chump change. So, it left a bitter taste in my mouth, but I went back in 2004 for my uncle's funeral. So it'd been about 11 years since I'd been there.
Okay.
And as I was going around, I was like, this country's changing. Like I could see development, I could see that, there was a certain plan that was happening in terms of certain areas were being developed into nicer areas. And I saw the vision. I was like, you know what? I could see this changing very soon. So there has to be a certain kind of plan to move back to Ghana eventually. I went back in 2009, stayed for the better part of a year. I had a business, had a graphic design company, as well as I had a recording studio as well. So my company at the time was called GSJ Media, which stands for graphics, sound, and journalism. So those are all the disciplines that I studied, and that's what I worked in. And I was working with a lot of big companies, and I was doing very well until a few things happened in my personal life that I had to go back to the UK.
Yeah.
But the idea or the dream was definitely to go back and live and do something. I didn't know in terms of what shape it would take, but as the world, as our great creator will have it, I met my wife in Ghana. I wasn't looking for anybody, met my wife there, and the rest is history. We're making great things. So
right.
Yeah.
So there's this ongoing thing where we are Africans in the diaspora are repatriating to Africa. Mainly, a lot of people have their eyes set on Ghana. How do you feel about that?
I think it's wonderful. I mean, let me broaden it so you understand where I'm coming from. I grew up in an area, even though my mom was very conservative. I grew up in an area that was very. It was just a multicultural. It was mixed in South London. So I had Jamaican neighbors. I had Indian neighbors. I had, I believe they were from Austria. I had a white South African that lived on the ground floor. This is an apartment block, by the way. I had Nigerians, and it was very, very mixed. There was a lot of English folk and different people from different areas. And I guess that's the reason why I could switch my accent sometimes to different ones. We won't go there today, but yeah. So when I think I was 12 years old or 11, when the BBC broadcasted Roots on television, and I was shocked by it. I was shocked. I was horrified, and I always kind of knew something was different. I just didn't know what it was. And I think watching Roots kind of opened up my eyes to a different narrative of how things went back in the day. Even in school, I was always the one to question history. You know, there was books that were coming out with pictures. They showed you. I remember my teacher showing me pictures of. I think they used to call them the railway children,
Mm-hmm.
because during when Hitler was bombing London, for example, they had to evacuate a lot of the children, and the parents weren't allowed to go with them. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they evacuated them to different safe places in and around, you know, in the countryside. And even that, when I was looking at the pictures, I was like, there's no reflection of myself in there. And I used to
Yeah, we're
question,
the black children.
like, where are the black children? Because I knew that there were black children at that time in England, but
Mm-hmm.
it was never seen. And, you know, I grew up watching a lot of films of like the Holocaust and stuff. You know, I watched Escape from Sobibor, all those things when I was very young. So I was exposed to a lot of history,
Mm-hmm.
and I just felt like it seemed very sympathetic on one side and not the you know, on anyone else. So pertaining to, you know, our race of people, I didn't see that reflection. So when I asked teachers these things, they never had an answer for me. So I guess when Roots came out, that was a shock. And it made me understand that these people that were trafficked illegally, I'm
Uh-huh.
going to call it what it is, because that's what it was. They were
Right.
not slaves when they were taken. You know, they
Right.
were normal human beings doing the everyday normal things that human beings did at that time, and they were kidnapped and taken to a foreign land to do work. You know,
Yeah.
that to do enslaved works. And you know, for me, I saw it. I didn't see it as, well, you know, these people are separate from us. I saw it as potentially these people could have been my cousin. These people, you
Right.
know, could have been my aunts and whatnot. So I never had that division that I know a lot of West Africans do have, that whole thing of, oh, you know, they were the rebels, they were the outcasts, you know, we sold them for this particular reason. And I've heard that narrative. I heard certain things said around me that I know, that's what the narrative was being pushed, and I didn't agree with it.
Right.
And I think we spoke about this before. I told you that it was like, you know, my family always questioned me, how comes, you know, you live in England, how comes you didn't marry a white person, or you didn't, you know, you haven't married a Ghanaian.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, to be honest, I know within myself, there was something in me that wanted to um, reconnect with,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's from the Caribbean or if it was African Americans. There was a certain struggle that I knew that was in me, even though I never experienced it. I felt that it was part of me,
Right.
and it was only when I started asking questions about my history
Mm-hmm.
that I put, you know, everything started falling into place.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, it wasn't a situation where I intentionally had children or married someone that was not of Ghanaian roots, but I knew in me that's what I really wanted, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right.
You know,
So
because it's that reconnecting back. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah. So
you know.
I want to ask you this, with the reconnecting that you wanted to do. You're married to a Black American, right?
Yes.
Um, so you're Ghanaian who's raised in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
partially raised in Ghana also,
Mm-hmm.
and you married a Black American.
Mm-hmm.
And how has it been trying to mesh those basically three cultures together? How has that been?
I mean, I didn't find it a problem. The reason being, if you look at the history of cinema, it's usually told from an American perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the films that come out I mean, the blockbuster ones
Yeah.
are American movies. So I grew up with more or less an American narrative of through cinema.
Right.
So for me to speak to or understand the history of what happens in America was basically through film. So and so I understood the language, even though we speak the same language, but we do have different you know, ways of saying certain things.
Right.
I understood it. So I knew even if I got with an African American, it wouldn't be a problem
Right.
because our cultures were very similar anyway.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense that, you know, as much as we, you know, we have the same hue, we still have things that pertain to our culture that is ingrained in us that, you know, you just can't remove. You know, we laugh at the same things, we cry at the same things, we feel similar things, and that's something that's throughout. It's deep rooted within us, you know, within the soul.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So let's talk about your family history.
Mm.
That, I think, is one of the most interesting and, I guess, amazing things that I, as an African American, I never ever thought about the perspective from what I would say would be your perspective, as in your history. So can you please share like what your family history is from both your mother and your father's side, and give us
Yeah, sure.
like a brief synopsis of that so people can
Yeah,
kind of understand?
yeah, right. So with the understanding of what is classed as the slave trade, um, I've my makeup, I'll say, my on my mother's side, they profited from selling people to the Europeans who became slaves, and I have my father's side of the family who were slaves,
They were trapped.
and they were trafficked, and some made it back home to Jamestown, you know. So I mean, I remember when I was in university, and there was a discussion about I can't. It was one of I mean, I studied media studies and journalism, and one of the subjects that one of the discussions that I was part of during that time, they were talking about Will Smith in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air,
Mm-hmm.
and they were trying to use this whole thing of because he used to wear colorful clothes, they saw it as he was the jester, so he was someone that wasn't taken seriously, and that you know, the father, the uncle, and the wife, and that household, you know, they were upper class and they were living in a nice neighborhood, and they had a butler, so um, they were looking up to white society because that's what they were copying. Okay.
Right.
And I raised my hands up and I said, I don't agree with that. And he said, what do you mean? So I spoke, if we had a class of, I think there was about, in the seminar, must have been over 30 people in the seminar. And I stood up and I spoke about my history in terms of, you know, my mum's side of the family being involved in the selling of humans that became slaves, and my father's side, and what and how I drew similar things to what the Europeans saw in Africa and became their norm, was the fact that there's always been a form of servitude in Africa. Okay.
Right.
Even
Right.
up to today.
Right.
You know, if you're of a certain class, and I hate using the word class, but unfortunately, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. If you're a certain class, you will normally have, you know, a house help, and the house help will maybe be somebody from a young person from the village who they couldn't look after, so the family will say, you know, go and live with this family.
Right.
You know, they can take you to school, but you do the, you know, the house chores and stuff like that.
Right.
So we've always had some level of servitude where, you know, the Europeans may call it a butler, but we had our own system where,
Right.
whether the person, if we were going to relate it to today, is, you know, I would have a driver, I would have a house boy or a house girl or house help is what they call it now, you know, and you know they get paid, and they get looked after. So it wasn't the same kind of thing as what, you know, what the Europeans brought where, you know, they saw that there was a certain level of servitude. They
Right.
brought a brutal
Before,
form of that.
yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, we are very caring people. And unfortunately, I think that whole thing of, I think from what I've learned from going to the slave castles and stuff is that, you know, whether it was the Germans, whether it was the British or the Portuguese who started it, that whole thing was, you know, they started with a good trading agreement where they were bringing Africans over to Portugal, for example, to be educated and stuff
Work,
like that.
yeah.
But it turned later on that, oh no, you know, we can use this for other things, and that's
Yeah.
how the brutal part of that agreement switched into what we understand to be slavery.
Right. So with your father's side, I think it's quite interesting that to have the story of your fathers, some of them being enslaved and going, where did they go and how did they get back? Like, how do we have an oral history of what happened?
Yes. Yeah. So basically, it's through my grandmother, through my father's mother.
Mm-hmm.
On their side, what had happened was, they came from Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever the link is actually those that actually returned back
From Brazil.
from Brazil and resided in Jamestown. So you know, the story, when you go to Jamestown, you see there's areas called, you know, Brazil or Little Brazil and stuff
Right.
like that. You know, there's still artifacts painted on the wall that pay homage to that journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do they know if they were smuggled back, or did they come back like they just hopped on a boat and came back, or like how did they
That's
manage to make such a long trip when they, I mean, if you're enslaved, I mean, I know the people didn't give them up willingly, so how did they manage to make such a long journey back?
that part of the story I'm not too sure, because it wasn't something that was openly spoken about.
Okay.
I had to ask questions. Now, with my grandmother, for example, she was very light skinned. Okay. So
Ah,
there was that whole thing of, you know, people asking questions and how comes your grandmother so light? And, I asked questions. I was a very inquisitive child.
yeah.
And just as an inquisitive adult as well. So my father's older sister, she's still alive. When I get back to Ghana, I told her I want to sit down with her and I want to hear some of the family's history, you know, because I heard it orally through my dad and others in the family. But in terms of sitting down with them one to one, it was just something that was said in passing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
And the
I'm
same with
trying to,
your mom's family? It's just kind
my
of like,
mom, funny enough, you know, my mom died last year, and she only told me about this 2 years ago. So that
wow.
was something that she was holding on to for a very long time. And you know, I've got pictures of her father, or was it, her grandfather was a chief, and so I've got pictures of him with the whole regalia and everything. And she said, and that's what she told me. She said, yeah, you know, they profited from the slave trade. And I said, what do you mean? And she told me and said, well, that's how the family got wealthy. They got wealthy by that's what they did back then, you know.
Wow.
So I haven't been to their hometown yet. That's something that I'm going to do when I leave. I wanted to do the journey with my wife because it's more important that is done, you know, because she's on the other side of this, you know.
Right.
Um, and it's not only my story, it's her story as well. It's all of our story. And I think the quicker you know, indigenous Africans that were involved or affected by this, and I will say genocide as well, because a lot were murdered at sea.
Absolutely.
The quicker they get to understand that they are part of this story, they have to atone for it. They have to apologize for it as well. the better, because it helps with the healing process.
Yes,
You know,
we gotta heal this thing.
yeah, we have to heal, we have to forgive each other. And when I say each other, I mean the healing process. I don't know if it's something that can only be done by one side,
No,
because
absolutely not.
yeah, you know, there's I'm 45 years old now, and I know for a long time in my life, I had to deal with the forgiveness of my ancestors, what they did.
What they did. Yeah.
Yeah, they're because it's, regardless of how you want to see it, it's a betrayal.
It
You
is.
know, it's a betrayal
It's a
of your own
family
people.
betrayal at that. Like,
Yeah, you know, it's painful, and it's a history that needs to be told, and
we need to tell it.
we need to tell the story. Because the thing is, when you leave it for somebody else that is not part of our culture to tell the story, they can spin it any way they want to.
And they
can
do.
spin it, yeah, they could spin it from the angle of, we came to trade and the people were willing to sell us their own people,
right?
Which is not the truth. You know,
right.
is far from it.
And I think a lot of times, on our side, on this side, there's so much pain attached to it. And like you said, there needs to be some forgiveness done on both sides. Because one of the sisters said to me today, she said that, it makes her feel some kind of way when we say our people, what y'all did to our people. And she's like, do you not realize that those were my aunts and uncles and cousins, and these were my people too. These are our people. So like, you are Ghanaian and I'm a Black American. It doesn't, more than likely, you could easily be my cousin.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy that even my husband, who's Ghanaian, could be my cousin. His mother called us twins. We look a lot alike. Every time I'm in Africa, somebody wants to claim that I'm from their village.
But the interesting thing is, when a lot of African Americans come over, that is the shock to the system. Is like, you look around, you're like, wow, that could be aunt this, that could be cousin that could be. And I see that with a lot of the Caribbeans when they come over as well. It's the same thing. It's like,
Gabriel.
It's you see it.
My mother,
it's in the bone structure, it's in everything.
Listen, my mother was in the market and she saw someone who looked like her cousin. She said it looked like her cousin so much that they call him hot bone. And she was like, hot bone. And she was like, I know this, you hear me? I know you hear me. And then she was like, wait a minute, I'm in Africa. Hot bone is not in Africa. He cannot be in Africa. And it wasn't him, but it was somebody who looked just like him, to the point where my mama was just like, I can't believe somebody looked like him, looked like somebody in my family to that degree. So, I think it's just, I think it's important that we have these conversations and try to start mending these broken pieces and try to, bridge the gap. How do you think Ghanaians feel about us making this journey back?
Right. There could be a number of things, because, there's the idea that if you're coming from the West, then you must be coming with money, right? So you do have to question whether the relationships that people are forging when they come over, if they are genuine relationships based on, I'm actually interested in making a friend, or am I befriending you because I want to make some money from you?
Right.
Okay. So, from that perspective, when you see or when you speak to some Ghanaians, they might have some level of resentment towards those that are coming in because they see it as they have. But they don't realize that because you're coming from outside, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have. You
Right.
know, we are blessed in a sense that, you know, the countries that we're coming from, whether it's the UK or like I'm in Florida right now, like when we're leaving the US and we're leaving with dollars, that the currency is strong. So when you get there, you've got a lot more money than normally that, you know, than they have. So that's the only thing that differentiates us from each other, is the fact that the value of the currency of where we're coming from is stronger. But they don't understand that. They see it sometimes from the perspective of maybe, you know, you're coming in and you might be coming to take over. Now, those that are living in Accra, for example, are used to seeing a lot of people coming in and they're coming out, whether they're, you know, whether they're foreigners, whether they're returnees. So they're kind of used to that. But there's certain places that are remote villages that may not be, you know, they might not be used to seeing Africans with foreign accents.
Yeah.
So to that is like, whoa, this is strange. What's going on? They're used to seeing foreigners because you have NGOs coming in all day long.
Right.
You know, white doctors, you know, coming in to whatever they do in those neighborhoods, you know.
Right.
But I know it's definitely a bit of a cultural shock for those that are in remote areas. But I think all round, especially after the year of return, it was such a good thing that was done by the initiative by the government. Mm-hmm. I think it's positive. I think moving forward, they will embrace it a lot more if those that are coming over come with the mindset of we're coming to embrace the culture that we've come to meet, mm-hmm. and not with the idea of, you know, you've got a crap country, this should be done better, so we're better than you, we're going to do what we think is right, and if you don't, you know, succumb to what we see as a good thing, then so be it, we're going to live our own existence. When you do that, you're going to come up against a lot of bad energy.
Yeah, and hesitation.
You know?
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that leads me into a question that I wanted to ask you. I wonder, do you know about the issues that they're having in the Gambia with African Americans?
No.
Okay, so we have a couple of, you know, the Gambia is super small, so it doesn't take, you know, Ghana's small and everybody knows everybody. So mm-hmm. I can imagine how it is in the Gambia being even, the Gambia is like a fraction of the size of Ghana. So we have some situations in the Gambia, where a situation in the Gambia where there's a young lady who's from here. She has made some remarks that have been quite distasteful. A lot of the things that she's saying is not that it's not true, is that it's the way that she says it or the way that she goes about it. It has a very oppressive and European white privilege type of undertone to it. And then there's some things that were just just downright disrespectful, calling Gambians stupid and slow and all of this stuff. That led to a situation in Sierra Leone where some repats in Sierra Leone are they're petitioning the government for citizenship. And they were having a meeting with the government, and the officials were saying to them, they brought up this video of this woman with all of these disparaging remarks. And they're like, so how are you guys going to guarantee us that this is not going to happen in Sierra Leone? So, of course, with the number of us who are starting to make this journey back over, there are a lot of people who have concerns about, we don't want to have another Liberia type of situation. I agree. I can understand why that would be a concern. From your experience. You know a lot of diasporans.
Mm-hmm.
From your experience, how do you see or do you feel like they have a more of a coming to help the situation or more of a takeover type of spirit?